Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.
Whoa, that you? Got another murder for you.
Mr. LaFoe? What brings you here?
I don't know who I am.
You don't know who you are?
You know who you are.
There are different versions of me in the world.
I think someone's trying to kill me.
Different victim, same body.
Everybody thought it was you.
Is he a relative?
Come this way. You're a time traveler.
I was 20 years old. This beautiful girl. He appeared on the road out of nowhere. If it wasn't for you, we'd still be together.
The universe is not about you.
You look so much like him.
Parallel reality. You fragmented into about 7 different versions of yourself. One of them happened to be a psychopathic killer.
What happened to Daniel?
It'd be wise to leave well enough alone with Mr. LaFoe. Tampering tangles the tissue.
The past is a dangerous place.
Hey folks, welcome to a special episode of The Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White, and today I'm bringing you an interview with Gabriel Judet-Weinshel and Edoardo Ballerini, who are the forces behind the movie Seven Splinters in Time. Gabriel is the writer-director, and Edoardo is the star of the film. And this is a great time travel, film noirish mystery. Lots of stuff going on here. It's got a great visual look to it. I highly recommend it. It is coming out to on demand, I believe through iTunes, maybe through some other platforms on July 13th. Definitely keep an eye out for it and enjoy the interview. Gabriel, I want to know, how did you decide to get into film?
I actually don't remember. It happened to me so early. It was sort of a precognitive choice because I think I've always wanted to make movies as long as I can remember. As a 2-year-old, my parents say I was drawing little flip books that you animate by hand. And by 5 or 6, I had picked up one of the early video cameras and was making films with my friends and directing them quite bossily around into little movies. So I don't think it was ever a clear choice. It was just something I've always remembered doing and being really compelled to do.
And Edoardo, how about yourself? What was your decision to get into movies?
The short answer to that for me is that I wanted to be a writer. And when I graduated college and I sort of started down that path, sort of writing and academia, I found it to be very lonely, to be perfectly honest. And I was looking for something that was more collaborative, and literature into playwrights served as a bridge into acting and then eventually into film and television. That was the quick story of my journey to acting.
Edoardo, your father's a writer as well.
My father's a writer. I come from a family of academics, and it was sort of a natural path for me. Then I found it to be, as I say, just a very solitary kind of experience. And I was looking to be surrounded by other creative people. And the theater, which was the first place I started, although I don't do much theater, seemed like a natural combination of literature and performance. And so that's where I found myself.
But you have done writing as well. I remember your short, Goodnight Valentino from, early 2000s, right?
That's correct. I did write that, although I had a co-writer in John Rothman, who was also my co-star and co-producer on that. And then I worked on some other feature concepts, as most actors, I think, do. It just never felt like the natural path for me. And then ironically, and Gabe knows this about me, is one of the sides of my acting now is actually a return to literature because I do a lot of narration of audiobooks. So I seem to have found my way back to literature somehow.
And Edoardo and I actually met along writing paths. We were introduced by a mutual friend, a casting director, Sigda Miguel, and sort of the auspices for the introduction was that Edoardo was writing a script on the silent film star Valentino, looking for a director, but there was also sort of an opening for me to come in and help work the screenplay with him. And that's actually our first project together. We spent a bit of time rewriting the screenplay and exploring the way we might get it made.
What year did you guys meet?
That was 2007, 2008.
I think it may have been even a little earlier. Yeah, I was going to say 2000. No, yeah, that sounds about right. Maybe even as early as 2006 when we first met, but certainly 2007, I think.
While we're talking about this, it's a good segue into how we came together. And it was this, as Gabe said, a mutual friend and casting director, Sigda Miguel, who originally just thought that Gabe and I would be, we'd sort of be a good match, as it were. He sort of played matchmaker between a director and an actor, and two people that had film ambitions. And he was right. He knew Gabe, he knew me. He said, you guys have to meet. Eduardo, you have a project. Gabe also has his projects. You guys just need to get in a room together, and you'll like each other. And he was absolutely right, and we're forever grateful to Sig.
But it took a while longer to work towards what eventually became Seven Splinters in Time. We, like I said, developed this other project, and I think there was discussion about other films, and it was really almost a moment of desperation that triggered making this movie. I had a script in development in Hollywood, or at least on the outskirts of Hollywood, that after about 2 years, especially given the recession of 2008, just didn't seem to be going anywhere. And I sort of went back to my roots of making a film very guerrilla style, just using whatever I had at hand. And I started shooting this film really without much of a plan. It was really an inchoate series of images. But fairly soon on, I think I was just talking to Eduardo about it and described what I was doing, and he expressed interest. And before we knew it, the ball was rolling for Eduardo to star in the film, and he had found some financing. He came on as a producer as well as an actor.
Well, how does that idea, and you kind of doing this guerrilla style, how does that coalesce into what we see with Seven Splinters?
My conceit of the film, especially at the beginning, was, but my mother is a painter, and I always wanted to make a film very much like a painter, at least an abstract painter, makes a painting, which is you follow an impulse and you respond to that impulse. So you respond to the line that you've drawn or the line you've painted and react in the moment to that, which is, of course, a somewhat ludicrous prospect for making a film, because obviously you have a lot more resources that you have to bring to bear and mistakes are more costly. But nonetheless, that's how we started. And the film is very much, especially at the beginning, it started very much as an improvisation. I didn't have a full script, and we started shooting sort of these sundry images on the weekends. And from there, a storyline emerged. And I think even at the point Eduardo became involved, it was really just that. It was an outline. And we brought in some financiers on the strength of a trailer. And it really wasn't until about 3 weeks, 2 weeks even, before we started principal photography that we had a script locked down. I think that is hopefully the charm of the film, that there's a very handmade and improvised quality to it. It doesn't feel quite as clearly delineated. It sort of unfolds, maybe like a jazz improvisation.
That's a really good metaphor for it, and especially the way that the music plays with the images as well, and the way that the images bring so many different flavors to it. And I have to ask, in this day of modern digital trickery, were you shooting on different formats, or were things just treated to look like they were different formats?
We shot on at least 17 different formats. And my cinematographer, who's also a producer on the film, George Nicholas, he and I are both, real film purists. We really love celluloid. And especially when we started, we were very nostalgic for the days of shooting in film. It was right around the transition point between digital and film. And some of the early images we shot were actually on 35 millimeter. He teaches at a film school at Hofstra University, so we had some access to gear. And indeed, we shot the film on all of these different mediums. It's the early red MX and the Super 16 footage. We shot color, black and white, reversal, negative. There are still images that have been animated. There are frame grabs that have been printed out that I painted, animated, and rephotographed on a Bolex. And, that just sort of became a concept of the film. It's so much about memory and the texture of memory that we really wanted the medium that we were telling the story in to reflect that, to reflect this sort of collage-like form that memories take.
How long did it take for the shooting of this film to go?
The length of the shoot, the principal photography, was about a month, I want to say. But we also had shot some things prior. And then we came back, was it 2 years later, to shoot a sequence again. So it was a lot of, pieces being done, but the bulk of it was about a month. It was a very sort of improvisational month of shooting as well. That's very much the nature of this film. And we would have to invent things on the fly. There were a couple of instances where we lost locations, literally the moment we arrived in front of them. And we would have to come up with something else. And I think it actually serves the film because it becomes part of the heart and soul of the film, that you feel like it's being done and it's being treated in a different way. And I'm very proud of that. I think we set out to do something. We sort of jumped in and we said, okay, now we're just going to start swimming and see where we go. And not a lot of people do that, but we had the guts to do it. And I think it shows in various aspects of the film.
Yeah, this is not a mass-produced major studio film. This is a small batch, distillery, handmade, one-of-a-kind movie that's been polished very lovingly. But it after principle, I think we took about 6 years in post, and that extended post process was due to a variety of reasons. Part of it is that it was really an ambitious film we were making. There are 300 visual effects shots, and we finished with very little left in our arsenal in terms of resources. A lot of those effect shots had to be done very slowly in people's spare time as favors. And then I also sort of took it upon myself to do the score, and that was a 2-year process in itself. And it was also a complicated film to find in the edit. So I think we're rounding out 9 years from the day we first started shooting images for this movie.
Eduardo, how was it playing different aspects of yourself, and how did you manage to kind of keep those straight? Because obviously you can't film this movie linearly. That's just impossible, I would imagine.
When Gabe mentioned how we met and he sort of first threw out this idea, and as an actor, it was so delicious, right? Somebody says you're going to have to play multiple characters in a film. There are multiple versions of the same person. And you think this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. This really, really does not come around. And so that was sort of the hook for me as an actor, to say this is an amazing opportunity. And Gabe, I'd seen some of the short work that he'd done, and he obviously has a brilliant visual style. I thought we can pull this off. And then when we got to the shooting of it, there's obviously a main character in Darius, and then the other Splinters who come off of him, and those were shot more compactly. So the other characters that are in the film would be done in a day or two. So that was sort of easier to control that way. But there was something, I have to say, as an actor, I like to prepare. I like to know what I'm going to do the next day. I like to work with my co-stars. I like to rehearse. I like all of that. But there was an aspect to this film where I did say, I kind of, a little free jazz here. I kind of have to just go. I just have to jump in on the day. And very much in keeping with Gabe's filmmaking style and musical style and the nature of the production, as we mentioned, I did the same thing as an actor. There were days when I would just say, we're going to put on this costume. Here's our character. And I'm just going to, solo, basically. I'm just going to have to go for it here. I'm going to have to make something up on the fly and just go. And it felt more in keeping with the spirit of the project to do it that way. With Darius, the main character, there was a lot more work that Gabe and I put in beforehand. And we got to work with Austin Pendleton and Emmanuel Shariki and Lynn Cohen. We would have rehearsals. Al Sapienza, another wonderful actor in our film. We would have rehearsals around that. But the other characters were really just kind of spontaneous and free. And I loved that aspect of it.
I'm just very excited for the world to see Eduardo's performance in this. It's such a versatile, agile tour de force of a performance. And he's not only playing all these different roles, but sometimes in the same frame as other characters. Sometimes he's fighting with himself. There are chase sequences with himself. And the whole time, there's all the acrobatics of that, but also just a real emotional authenticity that grounds the film. And I'm really excited for people to, if they don't already know Eduardo's work, to discover his work in this film.
I was so excited to see Austin Pendleton in this. He has been a favorite of mine for a long time.
Austin is absolutely amazing, and we were thrilled to have him. Very many people recognize Austin, but he's not quite a household name as much as he should be, but he's played opposite everyone. He's worked with Meryl Streep and Sidney Lumet, and you see him, he's sort of the Zelig of stage and screen, and we were just blown away that he accepted this role, and he was just amazing to have on set. Completely wonderful to be around, and really generous with his performance.
Well, the backstory there, this is Eduardo speaking, is that Austin was somebody I'd studied with at HP Studios in New York. Austin is probably the busiest man you'll ever meet. He's been in about 1,000 films. He's directed about 1,000 plays, and he's written even more. And he also finds time to teach. And so when I moved back to the city from Los Angeles, shortly after I'd met Gabe, I started studying with Austin on the recommendation of a friend. And then this role came up in our film, and Austin came up as a possibility. It was extraordinary because I reached out to Austin and said, I'm doing this. What do you think? We'd love to have you. And then he came on board, which was extremely flattering to me because, I was the student, and it was like the teacher saying to the student, I will work with you as a peer now. And that was so humbling and flattering to me. Austin said one of the kindest things that I've ever heard in my career one day on set. He said, I'm doing this movie because you're doing this movie. And it was just, to this day, that brings a tear to my eye. And he's such a wonderful man and a wonderful actor, and he just commands this performance, and we were extremely lucky to have him.
I can't imagine. Well, I've worked on projects that have taken years to put together, but with a movie, it's got to be so difficult, especially you were talking about coming back years later and, reshooting a scene. How is that even to just kind of pick up those feelings again and even, get the band back together and let's redo this scene again?
Eduardo, how did that feel?
Well,
we went back and thought this was the climactic scene of the film. It's the fight sequence that ends the film. And for technical reasons I won't get into, the special effects weren't working as they were with our first shoot. So we had to redo the choreography with with fewer resources than we had during Principal and a even more stripped down skeleton crew. But how did that feel as an actor, Eduardo, to go back into it 2 years later?
I'm not going to lie, it was difficult. And there was, because, it's just us talking here. I was originally a little bit upset that we had to do this because I wanted it that sequence to come out of the same period of time in photography that we had shot the rest of the movie. And so when Gabe called me and he's like, listen, we really want to redo this. I remember saying, do we have to? Is there a way we can make this work? Come on. Not that I didn't want to get back with our crew who were wonderful, but I just thought, wait, we've done it in this time period. Let's try to see if we can keep it all there. And then when I understood that it was not possible, I was like, okay, here we go. And then I will say this, that Greg Bennick, who plays John Luca, who came out to do the sequence as well, he made me see it all in a new light. He was there on set, and he was so happy, and he's a happy person in general, and he's a wonderful man. He was so happy, and he was just like, this is great. We're all back together. We get to keep doing this. And I thought it sort of clicked at that moment. I was like, right, this is a good thing. This is a good thing. Like the film is still going and we're improving it. But originally, I will admit it was a little difficult to swallow, but it's obviously for the best in the film. So I'm glad we did it.
Every time we see Greg now, he says, let's reshoot the tunnel sequence one more time. I swear at the premiere in Los Angeles, he will say that to us. He's very, very excited. Yeah. We may reshoot it yet again just for the DVD extras.
Gabe, this is your first feature film, and you choose to work on a project that takes you, how long did you say? Like 9 years to complete?
9 years. It was completely idiotic, and I wish I could go back in time and make a wiser choice. Yeah, everything they say about your first indie or about your first feature, regardless, is you want to keep it simple, especially if you're doing it on an independent film budget. You want just a small handful of characters, a handful of locations. You certainly don't want any special effects. You don't want to do the music yourself. All of the things that you're supposed to do when you make an independent film for the first time, we broke those rules, and I think that's part of the reason this took so long. But there you have it. I'm not quite sure how we got into this mess, but we came out the other side, and we're really happy with what we have.
This is a time travel film in a sense, and you look at something like Time Crimes, which is 3 actors, maybe 4, no real special effects, super, super simple kind of thing. And then look at this, which is kind of an art film mixed with a film noir, mixed with a time travel film. I do have to ask you, I can tell one influence right off the bat. When you have a character named McFly, I'm like, okay, he's a big fan of Back to the Future. But what were some of the other influences to bring all of these disparate elements together into one cohesive package?
Well, there definitely is that Back to the Future reference. There's actually a series in the film of shout outs to other time travel films, everything from the very mainstream Back to the Future by Bob Zemeckis. There's a scene of my old childhood friend Akiva Schaffer, who's actually also a director, jumping over a car on a television screen. So reenacting that scene from the first Back to the Future. But then we also have some sort of artier references. We have Chris Marker's La Jetée being reenacted on the same TV screen. And there's a reference to Lemmy Caution, the character in Godard's Alphaville. And I think when we were starting out, and Eduardo and I talked about this a lot, Darren Aronofsky's first film, Pi, was definitely a big influence, at least in the spirit of that film. That film he made for, a fraction of a normal budget, and really did everything himself. It was very handmade, and it had a real guerrilla spirit. And that film was a huge influence. And I think also a film that I hadn't been aware of until we really started developing this film, Chen Kareth's Primer, which is a big time travel kind of cult film, and just a brilliant, really smart film. I think a much more technically accurate depiction of time travel. That film really, I think, gets closest to what if time travel were really possible, or assuming, or even if it is possible, it's how it would actually, the mechanics of it would actually go down. But that film is a really smart, low budget, lo-fi sci-fi film. So that was definitely a point of research. But I just watched everything, I really did a lot of time travel film research. Especially, I'm not inherently a sci-fi connoisseur. I wouldn't say I knew that genre backwards and forwards before going into this. I sort of stumbled into making a sci-fi film. So there was a lot of kind of catching up to do.
Now, are you guys in constant contact during this 9-year period? Or, because Eduardo, I know you are off doing so many projects. You seem like an actor who never sleeps. Just looking at your CV, I remember you from, obviously The Sopranos. My wife is a big fan of Elementary. I've seen you show up on there. So there are so many things that you just are working on at all times. Are you like checking in every once in a while with Gabe? Like, are you still eating? Are you still there?
Yeah, there's definitely. We did worry that Gabe had stopped eating and sleeping at one point. But yeah, obviously, our careers have gone on, and we've continued to work. All of us, the other actors, our producers, have made other films. I've done a number of TV shows, some of which you mentioned, all that kind of stuff. But yes, we were in constant contact. I did want to say one thing about the whole 9-year process, and that is this was really a study in determination on Gabe's part. There were so many points during these 9 years where he could have given up, and possibly even people encouraged him to just let it go and say, it didn't work out, move on, do the next thing. But he was the one, and it's his film, and this makes sense, that he never let go. And this is just an extraordinary feat, that he just stayed with it and said, I believe in this film. I believe in this film. It will find an audience. It will find its way. And we were, quite frankly, rejected by a number of film festivals over the years, some of which we would submit to again with a different cut. We'd get rejected again. And Gabe just wouldn't let go. He's like, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep working on it. And somebody's going to see this. Somebody is going to like this. And lo and behold, somebody came along and invited us to CineQuest, which is a wonderful film festival in San Jose, California. And then Gravitas Ventures, a distributor, called and said, we want to distribute the film. And all of a sudden, all of that work paid off. And it was just kind of this watershed moment, I think. And now we have to see how it fares, with the public and in the marketplace. But it's really, whatever happens with this film, it is just an extraordinary thing that Gabe has done, that he made this thing from start to finish and never let go. And I'm in awe of that.
Eduardo, what are you doing in August? Because I was talking to Greg, and we were thinking we could reshoot the tunnel sequence. I think we should reshoot it. It is going to be hard to let go of the film. And I want to add, it wasn't just me. I think I had an amazing team who never gave up on the film either. They were always checking in. Like I said, they were completely game when we reshot things. There were many things to do throughout the post-process that didn't just entail me. I had a really wonderful, determined team who kept working and trying to marshal resources when we could, and I wouldn't obviously not have gotten here alone.
Well, what's kind of the next steps for the film, and what do you guys have planned for it?
We are about to release the film into the world. We have a 3-city theatrical distribution deal, so the film will be opening in Los Angeles July 13th. We have our premiere in Beverly Hills the 11th. We have a one-night engagement in New York City this coming Monday. I don't know when this will air, so that I should say it's going to be July 9th at the Anthology Film Archives. And then the film will be opening at a theater in Seattle, I believe, late in July. We don't have a date for that yet. And then if you are not in those cities or can't travel to those cities, the film is going to be released on VOD on a number of platforms July 13th. Lucky Friday the 13th.
And what's next for you, Gabe?
I have two scripts, and I actually would be really happy to make either one of them or even make them concurrently, which would be a terrible idea, but I'm so excited about both of them. I want to make them both right away. One is a sort of futuristic dystopian musical with only 3 characters, and I actually have a lot of the music for that written. Like I said, I'm also a musician, and I've always trying to find intersections between those disciplines. So I have a lot of those songs written. And the other is a sort of a character-based, multi-character drama, a little in the spirit of like P.T. Anderson's Magnolia. There's a lot of different intersecting, storylines or Altman shortcuts, something like that. And that has some sort of magic realist touches. But I want to make another film is the short answer.
Before I forget, is the soundtrack going to be released for Seven Splinters?
The soundtrack is released. It's actually already out in the world on Sonoblast Records. You can find it on Spotify and iTunes and Amazon. So just if you want to Google Seven Splinters in Time, it will come up. And there's 93 minutes. We released all of the music I wrote for the film. There's 93 minutes of music for what was a 75-minute film.
What's next on my plate is I wish I could announce officially, because there are a couple of things I'm circling right now that either of which I hope comes to bear, but they're not officially yet, so I can't say anything. But there are a couple of film projects that would be in the fall. And then the other thing I'm working on is actually I record, as I mentioned earlier, I do a lot of recordings, and I'm recording this massive, massive piece by a Norwegian writer named Karl Ove Knausgård, who wrote a 3,500-page memoir, essentially. And I've done the first 5 volumes, and we're now in the middle of volume 6. I owe about 800 pages of audio recording on this project, which has been extraordinary, I have to say. One of the absolute highlights of my professional life has been recording this man's work. So I have that in front of me, and then, as I say, there are 2 film things which I wish I could just tell you were definitive and happening. But you'll have to have us back on so I can tell you about that later.
I can't believe you're doing all of these things, and you've taken on. He's sort of like the modern day priest, right? The 800-pager. It's tremendous amount of time. This Norwegian writer is he's quite extraordinary, and he's. I have to say, I feel like I'm playing a character, and it's taken years. Another project which has taken years that I've been playing this man for years, and I call it the. I think in total it's going to be about 150 hours of audio. And I call it the 150-hour monologue that I've been working on. Wow. It's been it's been an extraordinary experience. He's a wonderful writer. Check him out if you can. If you have time to read 3,500 pages, he's your man. Talk about it. I wonder what his tunnel scene is.
Yeah, he's rewritten a few scenes. But there's that, and then, as I say, this fall there's a couple of film projects which I really, really hope work out. We're talking about them now, so hopefully the deal happens.
Eduardo, I want to get real nerdy with you because I love audiobooks, and I've always been curious. A couple things. Are you going someplace to record that, or do you have a recording set up in your house for that kind of thing?
I do actually have a little studio in my place, but mostly I work in other studios. Usually the publisher wants you to come to them. But yeah, it's an extraordinary medium, and as an actor, it's something I sort of came into about 5-6 years ago. Somebody asked me to do something. I didn't really know much about it. And there's a very sort of Seven Splinters in Time aspect to it, in that you're playing multiple characters. It's the same kind of thing, because you have to do every character in the book, obviously. And so you have to characterize them. And so as an actor, it's one of the most extraordinary challenges you can face. I've loved the work, and I've read some extraordinary books and met some extraordinary writers over the years. So that has kept me very busy. And it's a nice balance between working on set and then working in the booth. I love filming, but I do find it taxing. you do a month where you're getting up at 4 a.m. and you're shooting till midnight and you're, all of that, versus, kind of leisurely strolling into a studio at 9:30 or 10 and being done by 3. So it's a nice balance of the two. So I always try to go back and forth between the two. I will say this, though, Gabe and I would love to make another film together at some point. We will see if we can work that out. Hopefully it won't take us 9 years the second time around. I think we've learned some lessons. Hard fought lessons.
Faster, please.
When we first met, I think we had the sense that we were going to be collaborating for many, many years. And so, hopefully there's another project out there for us, and we can bring that.
One more nerdy question about audiobooks. Do you go into the studio then and you say, okay, we're recording, or somebody tells you we're recording, 50 pages today. I imagine that you have a set that you're going to do. And how long does it take you to prepare for those kind of things? Because this isn't movies. This isn't TV. You don't have to memorize this stuff to go in there, but I imagine you have to do a lot of pre-reading.
Yeah, you certainly want to be familiar with the book. I don't think you need to know every word of it. You just need to sort of skim quickly and have a sense. There should also be a little surprise to you while you're reading it. Things should be fresh as you're reading them. And we typically work about 5-6 hours with breaks, obviously, and can get usually about 80 to 100 pages done. And I know that sounds like a lot to people, but that's just a rather sort of steady pace of reading. The first time I ever did a book, I did a day and passed out afterwards. I was so tired and exhausted and just overwhelmed by it. And I did. I got home and I fell down and just fell asleep. But now, I've sort of found a rhythm with it. But it's been amazing because it has made me a better film actor, and film acting has made me a better reader. They kind of work hand in hand. I hope to continue doing both.
Your children are also very lucky to be read to by a professional audiobook reader.
Yes, I'm given the task of saying, here comes the award-winning audiobook reader to read a bedtime story.
Now go to sleep.
Yeah. Now
they go to sleep any faster.
No, they don't.
Gabe, I have one final question for you as well. I know that you directed Martin Scorsese in a short film, and I'm curious what it's like directing Martin Scorsese.
It's a very generous turn of phrase. I was lucky enough to, I was at the time represented by a management company that had also represented the actor Victor Argo, who had been in many Scorsese films. And Argo passed in, I want to say 2004 or 2005. And this management company was helping to put on a memorial that would honor him, different New York performers. And Scorsese had wanted to speak at the memorial, but because of scheduling things, I think he was finishing maybe Aviator at the time, he couldn't make it. So I sort of, by total chance, it fell upon me. They said, hey, we need somebody to shoot this. And I think I was about, I want to say 25 years old at the time. And I had actually, Scorsese was really the first director that I studied really with an avidity and passion. I did a research paper on him in high school, and I had seen all of his films, I think, except for Boxcar Bertha, maybe. And so I was completely starstruck and overwhelmed. And I thought, the first thing I knew, this was still, you could shoot things in video, and probably anybody would have just, usually sourced a perfectly good video camera. But of course, I thought we have to shoot Scorsese in film. You can't shoot Martin Scorsese in video. So we got a 60 millimeter camera and a small crew together. And I had about 15 minutes with him. And I think the extent of the quote unquote directing was I asked him for another take.
Eduardo, Gabe, thank you so much for your time today. And congratulations on Seven Splinters in Time. It is a wonderful film.
Thank you so much, Mike.
We really appreciate you taking the time.
If you enjoy this show and want more people to know about it, head on over to iTunes, leave a comment, and rate it 5 stars. Make sure you like and share us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Just search for Christopher Media. Thank you in advance for supporting Christopher Media by clicking on the PayPal button and by clicking through to all the sponsors who support ChristopherMedia.net. Most importantly, we would like to take the time to extend an extra special thanks to you. Christopher Media could not exist without your support. Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net, and thank you for listening. Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.